Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Phili Manove, and I work with the gender team from the Australian High Commission. I will be your moderator this afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. We welcome you to this session on gender equality and transformative approaches, or otherwise known as GETA approaches. This approach shows that for sustainable progress towards gender equality to happen, change has to happen at multiple levels, from individual to community beliefs, attitudes, and practices, through to structural, organizational policy and legislative changes that provide an environment for gender to flourish. Gender transformative change is happening in Papua New Guinea. Women and men in their family, communities, and workplaces are changing the way they behave to reduce the harms to women and girls and to strengthen their families, communities, and workplaces. We will hear more about this from our two presenters this afternoon. Supported by the Australian government through the Papua New Guinea-Australia Partnership, implementing partners of the Pacific Women Program have trialed a range of approaches over 8 years of programming in Papua New Guinea to bring about transformative change. They have been helping communities, families, and organizations to rethink gender roles and to change the way they work together. Now, to talk more about this, joining us here this afternoon, we have Ms. Mirriam Dogimab. Mirriam is the Papua New Guinea Country Manager for Pacific Women's Support Unit. Mirriam has extensive experience in program management and has knowledge of the gender sector in PNG. And joining us online from Goroka is Ms. Serah Chapau. Serah is the PNG Gender and Citizens Justice Program Manager with Oxfam in Papua New Guinea. Ms. Chapau joined Oxfam in January 2016. Prior to this, Serah was engaged with the CEM, Cardinal Stinging Life Project, from 2011 to 2015, and the Save the Children's Youth Outreach Project, which was from 2007 to 2011. Serah has more than 13 years' experience in the management and working directly and indirectly in the field of GBV, human rights, child rights, marginalized or most at-risk populations in PNG. Now, we'll go straight to Serah for your presentation this afternoon.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Serah.
Can we have the slide screen?
Sorry, one moment. Can we have the slide screen, please? Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Before I could say anything, I'd like to leave a note. Reducing gender inequality and violence against women and girls in PNG is vital for economic and social future of this country. So I'd like to take this time, this opportunity this afternoon to acknowledge the partners in this space as well. So Mirriam and I are pleased to this afternoon share with you what are some of the learnings Pacific Women Program has learned together with its partners about gender transformative approaches in Papua New Guinea. So we are presenting together Oxfam and the Pacific Women Unit. Oxfam represents all the other 12 organizations that are working in partnership with Pacific Women in this project. Then also we have 12 projects working with, not 12 partners, 14 partners in the country that work in this space doing gender transformative approaches in PNG. Now, these partners also have an average implementation time frame of more than 4.5 or over 4.5 years. So from that experience and that time frame together, we conducted a participatory review of the gender transformative approaches used in Papua New Guinea, and we have learned a range of key lessons. So here we would like to present, or probably present, some of the key lessons from this workshop that all these partners have presented. Maybe I'll just acknowledge these partners by at least giving their names out, sharing who these partners are: the UN Women, Group Women for Peace, FHI 360, Queensland University of Technology, Business Coalition for Women, Nazarene Center for Rehabilitation, IWDA, PSI, UNICEF, K International in PNG, Oxfam in PNG, and of course, University of Canberra, Menzies School of Health Research. And pardon me if I have not called the others who are also part of this review as well. So I would like to now start with presenting some of the lessons that we have learned from this review. Next slide, please. Can I have the next slide on?
It's on, Serah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I think it's just
no,
on
go
my
back.
side. Sorry about that.
Go back. Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, so one of the key lessons that we learned is gender transformation. Gender transformation needs to be explicit in the projects that we design. Now, Pacific Women Partners refer explicitly to gender transformation or women's empowerment frameworks, which makes gender transformation as a goal. So we have seen in the review that when gender transformation is explicit and deliberate in the aim of the project, then the gender transformation can be achieved. So that's important to also understand, not really having gender so much integrated, but having it more explicit is where we can at least achieve gender transformation. This way, gender does not get lost in the overall development of priorities, interventions, or targets that we're trying to achieve. Okay, we can talk about examples. So maybe I can move on to the next slide. So the other learning or key learning was gender transformation approaches requires long-term commitment. So as many of us know, in order for change to happen is committing time and resources in one location over a period of time. So that is something that we have learned from this review as well. So that means understanding, negotiating safely where power dynamics plays in within community or organizations, because transforming women and men's attitude, behavior is not easy, and we all know that in this space. So consistent and repetitive core messaging around gender transformation. So we're not only talking about individual person changing, we're talking systems here, we're talking structures here that needs to be changed. Hence, there has to be long-term commitment in this area. So for a project, to achieve gender transformation is really to have this long-term commitment and resources over time to see that happen. as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, another key, interesting key area that we also learned from this was gender transformational approach prioritized. The third element of gender transformation approach is prioritizing the participation of women and girls as change agents. So most times women are bystanders, or women get to just sit there and observe as, passive participants rather than being the frontliners, being the active people in decision, in project implementation. So this is one area that we have learned, that women has to be recognized as equal actors in decision-making roles as implementers. And women's view are beneficiaries, or, that they should not be seen as beneficiaries. In most cases, they should be seen as active players, active participants, the agents of change. That's what I'm trying to say here. So Pacific Women Partners sought out and partnered with local women-led human rights defenders, women-led organizations, and individual women who has credibility in the community that we can understand. Through them, we can learn we can learn about the context of what it's like to be a woman in Gambo, what it's like to be a woman in Bougainville, what it's like to be a woman, in Wewak. So working through these women rights organizations, individual women, gives us that insight of what it's like. So that is one of the learning that we have learned in this context. So these women, if we're going to talk development, it's really working with these women who are in the community to understand their context differently and respectively. Yep, next slide, please. Okay, most importantly, men need to be engaged meaningfully. So the key word here is meaningfully in gender transformative approaches. So Pacific Women, again, its partners found that recognizing, respecting, and working with existing leadership structures or social networks is an effective strategy, right? And it includes negotiating to ensure women's active participation as change agents. So recognizing the power structure that also disadvantage women. Now, it is important to acknowledge that men are mostly custodians of these existing structures and networks in the social networks that we have. So it's also recognizing that projects should be aiming to work to change this. So it is important to have men engaged in these projects. And it's equally important to know that women, Papua New Guinean women, do not exist in isolation, right? We also have men on the other side that we have to equally, share or contribute our life with, or share knowledge with. So in that space, when we talk in gender, it's also to recognize that we have to equally have men being part of all this change that happen and not working in isolation in all our programs that we do. So to change one part requires changing both parts. So both men and women should be working together. So with the prevalence of violence against women, it is necessary to also ensure that the focus of men's engagement on reducing harm to or benefits for women and girls is to really work side by side with men. So I think I will stop from here. These are the some of the key elements or key areas that we have learned. I will let Mirriam come in with the other slides or key learnings. Thank you.
Thank you, Serah, for that. So Serah spoke about the, there are 8 elements of gender transformative approaches that we have learned from our work from our partners here in Papua New Guinea. And Serah just talked about the first 4 elements of gender transformative approaches. I will now talk about the second 4 elements. As I said earlier, and as Phili introduced, there are 8 elements. So the 5th element that we have identified from our the work that our partners have done in the review is that gender transformative approaches. Can we have the next slide, sorry? Thank you. Gender transformative approaches need to work with credible partners and local change agents. Pacific Women Partners, through the work they've done, have found that insider-led change, ones that are led by people or leaders who are from within government departments, organizations, communities, or families, are a more effective strategy for transformative change. This is important because people who come from an organization, a community, a family, they understand the culture, they understand the power dynamics within the context that they exist in. So they are they're better placed to lead, be the change agents or lead the change that you want to see. And one of the things that's good about having people from the context that you're working in to create gender transformative change is that there is a benefit in them being part of the context. They're able to reinforce the messages in a consistent and repetitive manner so that it about the benefits of gender equality and what that means. And they stay in their community, they work with the community, and so that messages keeps being repeated over time. And so we find that that leads to that more gender transformative approach. And one thing we also want to note is that when necessary, it also involves negotiating so that women actively participate as change agents. As program developers and project managers, I think you have to be deliberate when you go into a context and you're setting up and you're seeing that there are no women participation, that you be deliberate about it and make sure that women are part of the process. They're part of the design, they're part of the planning, so that because their needs might not come out if they don't speak about it. So you have to make sure that women are part of the process of change. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the other element of gender transformative change requires working across multiple parts of society. That's something we've identified in the review. We know that the causes and consequences of gender equality manifest across all aspects of life. So to effect change, it also needs to take place everywhere, in how women and men see themselves, in family relationships, in the behavior we accept in our communities, in organizations, workplaces, policies, and laws. So it has to be a holistic approach in working to create change, or working to create gender transformative change. You cannot just focus on the family and expect change to happen in the community and structural level. You have to be intentional. If you want change in the community, you also have to make changes in the structures, in the policies, because all of that has an effect on that individual in the family or in the community. So Pacific Women Partners' efforts to transformative gender relations were more effective when they worked across multiple levels. Like I said, they worked in individual level, they worked with the individuals, they worked with families and relationships, they worked with community, and they worked with institutions. And they adapted a mutual reinforcing strategy. So they kept going back again, reinforcing the messages in all those different levels of society. We'll move to the next slide. Thank you. So the other element is gender transformative approach builds on existing protective customs and practices. A lot of times we assume that all customs and practices are bad, but we know through this review that there are customs and practices that exist that can be used to protect or enhance gender transformative approach. So Pacific Women Partners this is what they have done in terms of, they have adapted the following approaches to engage with customs and practices here in Papua New Guinea. So number one thing that most of the partners did was identify positive values or common interests. So they've identified community members, organizations that they know that they can work with. And these individuals or these organizations, they had buy-in into those values and interests, and they've worked together to create change. The other thing is facilitate a facilitation process where there's a reflection on negative gender consequences of some of the existing customary practices. So assessing, so one of the things that is important in facilitating the process is assessing the risk, and while you're assessing the risk, look at the context that you're working in and what is the safest medium for you to work in. So a lot of our partners identified negative gender practices, which they've used in turn, took it on board and put it into the training curriculums. They've created group discussions out of it, and they've held like community debates. So they've created that safe space to talk about the negative gender practices or customary practices in the community that they're working in. Also, demonstrate the benefits of greater gender equality. Here in Papua New Guinea, we like to think that we're more of an oral culture, so what we see is we believe. So practicing and demonstrating it is important. And a lot of our partners have done that by having men and women work together as community mobilizers, as peer educators. That also helps in showing that the issue of gender equality and change is not something that is only for women, but is equally for women and men. And supporting communities or organizations identify actions consistent with positive values and interests that will support women's access to resources, services, promote women's contribution in public and private spheres, and minimize identified harm. So a lot of the partners in the review also, they work with the partner through a process of understanding their culture, understanding the practices, understanding the benefit of creating that change, and then working with them to create that change. So setting out plans that enables them to work together to create the change. Next slide, please. So the final element in the gender transformative approach that we've identified in the review was build the capacity of project staff and partners. Pacific Women Partners found that investing in resources and time for staff and local partners to reflect on their own knowledge, skills, behaviors, and values pertaining to gender norms and inclusive development is essential. So it's really important to spend time in investing in building the knowledge, the skills, and also shaping the behavior of the people who will be taking your messages back into their community. because they become the role model of your message. So the actions the actions and then behaviors has to match what their messages that they're saying. So they also, the benefit on project side is that having those people work with you also helps them understanding what you want to get across in terms of the changes you want. They can translate that into the local context. And so that they speak the language, they use examples that are relevant for their context. And they will know because they are the experts in that context, and they will be able to translate, they will be able to use examples that make sense to the people of that context. You and I won't know that as outsiders when we get going. So it's important to invest in people who are leading the messages for you. So as I said, as experts in the context and as key change agents, staff and local partners are more effective when they are able to use local examples of gender power issues, because from context they will know what it is, and to develop strategies, provide training, adapt tools to the local context and audience. Next slide, please. So finally, there are some common themes of successful gender transformative approach from the review we know for the context of Papua New Guinea. Number one, community-led approaches provide the foundation for action and long-term transformation. When it's coming from the community, it's led by the community, that sets the foundation for change and foundation for long transformation. If it's a fly-in, fly-out kind of approach, that behavior won't be sustained, and the change that you want won't be sustained as well. When the person is in, there's the behavior. When they leave, it flies with them. Language and context are important elements that guide ways of working inclusively in diverse community contexts. Yes. So in Papua New Guinea, we're a very diverse country. So what works in NCD or National Capital District won't necessarily work in Eastern Highlands or in Goroka. And within those contexts, again, they're different. So that's why having local people lead is important, because they speak the language, they understand the context, and they're better able to lead. So there is no generic messages. The messages that you want is specifically targeted for that particular community. And the three modes, the main modes of working with communities we've identified has been working with women and men working together for gender equality. Like I said, men and women working together is important, because gender transformative change or gender equality that we want to see in Papua New Guinea requires both women and men, and not just women. Working with families to support change at the interpersonal and household level, that's something that we've seen. We value family a lot, and so change happens in family has a bigger impact than change happening in the family, because families, you support each other to reinforce that behavior of change that you want. And working with change agents and volunteers to promote local leadership, ownership, and sustainability. So those are some of the three main modes of working with communities that the review has identified through the work of our 14 partners. Thank you. I'll give it back to Phili.
Okay, thank you, Mirriam, and thank you, Serah. I'd like to remind participants, please, we'd like to hear your questions. If you can include them in the chat box, so our two panelists can be able to answer your questions. Now, I've got a question to start off our question and answer session. So this will go to, I guess, both of you. Can you explain more about how you can make gender transformation explicit in project design?
Serah, you want to start and give some examples from care, and then I can talk?
Hello, Serah?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello, the question's been shifted to you.
Right. Sorry, what's the question again?
Okay, I'll repeat the question, sorry about that. So can you explain some more about how you can make gender transformation explicit in project design?
Right. Okay. I'm with Oxfam in PNG. Now, it's not as if we have, I'll probably talk from experience with the Oxfam gender programs and the projects that we do. When we try to mainstream gender into our programming, and that's in terms of, making sure there equal participation or of men and women, having 10 men, 10 women in a training. And then, this is just to make sure or ensure that we just have equal participation of women and men in a certain venue or when we're visiting a community. So it's just counting number of heads. So that was more seen as, seeing their participation at that level. So we have come to realize that to be more effective, it's not only having them in the room, but creating that space also. So coming up with some of the indicators that indicate how are we empowering women to be speaking in that space. Not only are they there in terms of numbers, 10 women, 10 men. Are those 10 women actually being supported to say something, to express what they feel in the space where you also have men? So it's having indicators in different program objectives or outcomes that we want to see. It's really having those indicators that guides us to really see the outcome, the meaningful participation of women in that space. So yeah, that is one of the experience I can share in terms of having specific indicators in projects or programmings.
Yep, that's correct. So to add on to what Serah said, in addition to having indicators, I think it's also good to have good frameworks, use good gender transformative frameworks. So for example, our partner like CARE International, they use the women's empowerment framework, And then our other partner like PSI and FHI 360, they were drawing from the social ecological model. So when we say being explicit, we mean having modalities or frameworks that can directly lead to gender transformative change, and that's important. So having those and then having clear targets, having budget that specifically focuses on making sure that gender is just like Serah said, it's not mainstream or integrated, but it's in the forefront of your programming as well.
Thank you both. So we'll go on to our next question from one of our audience, and they're asking, can you explain more about drawing on protective cultural practices?
Sure. I think one of the things about, like Serah talked about in her presentation around working with men and boys is that men and boys are integral part of women's life. And also men and boys are they're custodian to our customs and cultures. So to change some of these behaviors that we want to see change, we also have to work with men so that being the custodians of customs, they get to change it as well. A really good example of that is that when we were doing the review, CARE did some work in one of the remote parts of Papua New Guinea, and they had really big difficulties getting women to go into the health facility to deliver safely, and that was because the community had a strong custom against blood taboo, so they couldn't access the health facility. So the project worked with the community to understand the importance of that health-seeking behavior and importance of why women need to go to the health facility. So it's about understanding customs that prevent access or prevent participation and working around it to make sure that women and girls they're able to access and able to participate. Serah, you want to add some examples from Oxfam work around that?
Yep. In terms of, I think from Oxfam's experience through our implementing partners in the Highlands and across Momase and Southern region, it's really, again, it comes back to understanding their own context. And I think the advantage that we had was having organizations that are based in those communities and have established relationship with the communities over time and understands the power dynamics and have that strong relationship where it helps when you want to talk about gender, when you want to talk about human rights. So it's not an area where we can easily just go in there and say, we can do this, but understanding what are the practices that are already there, what are the customs that are accepted and the ones that are not, the hierarchy of power as well in that community also helps to bring those messages across and enable change to happen as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Serah. Just letting everyone know out there, the GETA report can be accessed on the Pacific Women website for more information on this, what we're discussing this afternoon. We'll go straight to our next question. So this is to our two panelists. Do you have any reflections on engaging with women and disabilities, their position within communities, and how to build active and equal participation?
Serah, you want to start?
Sure. Okay. Again, from Oxfam's experience, we don't have, I cannot speak from a very vast experience. We have started working through the partners again, and that's through engagement with the DPOs in the provinces where our partners are currently working. So it's really not us as or our partners as the frontliners in this, but involving the persons with disability as part of the program designing, as well as implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. So from the Oxfam experience, we're really not, honestly, not at that level that we can say we have been doing this throughout, but it is something that we are working towards in terms of our implementing partners, identifying barriers, and working with PDOs currently. So this is more our learning phase in terms of working with persons with disability, but we would like to learn from other organizations and partners equally. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'd like to just add that disability is an area like gender transformative change. You have to be explicit about it. So you have to be the one that specifically looks out for it and bring it into the conversation and have it be part of your design and development of your work. If you don't talk about disability, then it just gets missed out or it's not visible anymore. So as people who do development work, I think it's good practice to be conscious about it, and as part of inclusiveness, we have to be the ones that look out for these things and talk about it in our community, also make sure it's coming out. So I know from this review that a lot of our partners have started doing that piece of work, trying to be more explicit in having disability be part of the programming, having them help with the design of workshops that they're doing, listen to them and understand them. Just like us as a program, we also, when we're doing workshops and when we're doing, especially workshops that we're doing, we try to be more inclusive and we listen to the community and we listen to their needs and we try to make sure that we bring that forward into how we run our programs as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirriam. So our next question is, can we accept religious beliefs as a negative influence to gender equality?
Serah, you want to talk about your circle of healing and then we can talk about this?
Sure, just repeat that line again.
So our next question is, can we accept religious belief as a negative influence to gender equality?
Right. I don't have a straight answer for that, but I can share our community and healing, healing and rebuilding program. Now, this is a trauma type of approach that Oxfam and its partners are doing. It is in its pilot phase. Now, we know that communities where there is violence, whether it's GBV, it's intimate partner violence, it's sorcery accusation-related violence, and that's where beliefs come in. We have this program where we have circles, where we have men, women, boys, and girls have their own circles, and that's where they come together and they talk about their experiences. They talk about their how they feel about the violence or the experience of violence that they have seen in the community or within the family. Now that is more that part of healing process. People are really sitting down and talking about it themselves, whether it's right or it's wrong. It's just creating that space where they at least come together and share that. And I don't know if it's, religious beliefs being part of it or not, but we have not really come across any, people talking about religion being part of, adding to more violence in the community. However, just discussing it and talking about it helps people to find their own answers within that as well.
Thank you. I can probably answer in a more generic way. I think in Papua New Guinea, religion is, churches play a big role in how people behave and how people think. So I know there is a gender of theology work being done here in Papua New Guinea, using the scripture to look and talk about gender. So that is happening. And I think church have a big way of influencing positive gender transformative change. And they have a platform where they exist in all the communities that we're in. Every settlement that gets built in the city, there's a church that goes with it. So they have a big part to play in how we as a society exist. So I would like to think that they can use their platform in a more positive way to create change.
Okay, thank you, Mirriam. I think we'll go on to our next question. So this viewer asks, in addition to people living with disabilities, has the GETA report taken into consideration intersectionality as well? So I'll read the question again, Serah. In addition to people living with disabilities, has the GETA report taken into consideration intersectionality as well?
I think we have. We've looked, like we said, women's experiences. To effect change, change needs to take place everywhere. So you have to look, it's in how women and men see themselves, it's in family relationships, it's in how our communities accept our behaviors. So I'd like to think that we have. Also, our partners, the work that they do, they also think, they also consider that. I want to say that that's a big part of how they do programming. They take into account for this woman to be able to effectively participate. Is the time that I'm going now into the community the right time for them? Is it? I know they also talk about. Is it coffee season, and is it the right time for me to go into the community to participate? Because women have to go and collect coffee and sell coffee. So we do, all our partners do take that into account. Is this training that I'm running, is morning the best time for this training, or is the afternoon the perfect time? So all those kind of elements they do take into account, because they know women have dual roles to play in the community. So that they have roles at home, roles in the community, roles in church. So all of that, they try to take that into account. Serah, you want to add something? I think you do.
I think, I think you have said that. Thank you. I have nothing to add.
All right, thank you, Mirriam. We've got a question here. This question reads, has your gender equality program impacted community perceptions on women candidates contesting national general elections?
Okay, that's a really, really nice question. As you would note, in the different partners that have participated in the review of this work, most of the partners that have been part of this process have either worked in gender-based violence, family sexual violence, or they've worked in the women economic empowerment space. Unfortunately, we do not have enough evidence. We didn't have enough evidence to include in this review work around women's leadership and women's participation in elections. So that is the missing piece in this review. And thank you for asking that question and for flagging that. Yes, we are aware of that. And from the list of our partners that you will see, and I encourage you to go on our website and download the report and read, because it's an amazing report that was developed by all our partners. It was a process that we went through with all our partners, looking at their work, looking at the evidence, look at their evaluations that they have done, and come up with this document. So it's a review that is based on evidence. So we didn't have enough evidence on women's leadership.
Thank you, Mirriam. So in the interest of time, we'll go to our last question for this afternoon. So the last question is, what are some approaches for working with men and boys for gender equality?
Serah, you start. Probably talk about the Now campaign and the work you do with young men. And
yeah, I think I would also like to acknowledge all the other organizations who are part of this review have their own approaches that they can share, but we don't have the luxury of having everybody share their experiences in working with men and boys. So I'll just share what Oxfam has been doing in terms of the Enough Now campaign. So we have, in that campaign, it's more working with young people to having them from the young age going up to have this nonviolent conflict resolution as the solution to problem, rather than quickly attending to, or putting violence or reacting to every situation with violence as is the main norm or the common norm that we have in the communities. And again, this came from our implementing partners on the ground, that the campaign should be more focused on young men and building in them the leadership skills as well as the nonviolent conflict and resolution skills, that they grow up having those skills in them, and also transferring that into their children as they grow up and their siblings around. So that is one of the approach that we used in terms of working with men and boys. So again, it's all separated, and then the community healing, like I explained before, that's where men and boys have their own space, and they talk about their behaviors. They talk about how much power they have and realizing those power invested in them and how much they can connect that to also the violence that they're creating, having so much power invested in men and boys in the communities. Is it bringing development or is it bringing destruction in the community? The way we use the power. So those conversations are happening more in that comfort space where only men and boys are talking to each other and having a male facilitator who is also their peer facilitating those sessions. So yeah, those are some of those success so far that we have seen, that men and boys are coming out and talking about that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Serah. I think just to add from our other partner who does a lot of work with men and boys, if you had tuned in yesterday afternoon, we had a panel discussion around working with men and boys, where we had Equal Playing Field, who is a partner of Pacific Women, who are doing a lot of work in school and working with young boys in school. Family Sexual Violence Action Committee, they have a male advocacy toolkit that they're going to roll out. And also Nazareth Center, a partner with IWDA. So they do a lot of work with male advocates in Bougainville, and Sister Lorraine and her team talked a lot of that yesterday. And I think some of the key things that came out of the discussion around that was that men understanding that they have the power, and there's been like a shared decision making and shared like responsibility, and there were a lot of, they've over time trained around 888 male advocates across the island of autonomous region of Bougainville. They've set up the men's hub for counseling, so focusing on men's need and the need for their counseling and to help with their rehabilitation as well. But I encourage you all to read the GETA report, what works. There's some really good examples of the different work that our partners are doing, and it's all in that report. Examples and some strategies or approaches that we talked about. You want to read more about it, go to the report.
Yes, thanks, Mirriam. I think we've come to the end of our session. Thank you for your questions. Like Mirriam said, please go to the Pacific Women website and access this report. It'll give you more information on the approaches that we talked about this afternoon. And now I would like to, thank you to Mirriam and Serah as well. Thank you for your contributions this afternoon. Now I would like to invite Tovi Amona, who's a senior program manager from our Pacific Women Support Unit office here in Mosby. She's going to read a poem called I Am GETA. It's from participants who contributed to the GETA review, and they contributed a line of each text reflecting a woman's experience with violence, her strength, and her hope to change. Thank you, Tovi.
I am GETA, reflecting back to see what lies ahead. A life free of violence, there is hope. a dream coming true, to be told and achieved. I work, I toil, I try. I am, we are together. Getting through today, there is a Wonder Woman in me. Empowerment is fulfillment. New me, forward I go. Unlearned and relearned, it's the new me. Power Mary. Bilum of life, it starts with one thread. I am but one person, connected to my place and my people. Change happens when we will it to, not when others will do it for us. Change is already happening. Families are stronger. Something no good come up in good plus something. Work belong good plus sin down inside long family must come up strong. It's my passion, it's my journey to empower people to better themselves. Strong women supported by strong women. Holding hands, we spearhead a path marked by unity. Telling of stories raised by voices of warriors. Men, women ignite fire to lighten spheres of freedom. I fly high and proudly like a kumul. Happy, smiling, healthy women and girls. Blow wind, down, down leaves. Sunshine, shine, give light and life. Papua New Guinea, light and life. I am Geta.
Wow, thank you, Tovi. That was nice. All right, we've come to the end of our session. Before you leave us, please leave us your comments and any feedback in our Zoom link. We'll leave it open for you at the end of this session. I thank all of you for participating, and we'll see you all tomorrow morning. Thank you, Serah.
Bye. Bye.
And thank you, Hilda.